So as I'm sitting here editing this video, I see that my camera has decided to focus on my car instead of me. So I'm sorry about that. It's going to be fixed in the next shot since I'm switching to a head camera and that does its focus by itself. So, sorry again, and let's get into the video.
Welcome back to another video. In today's video we're talking about diesel. More specifically the fuel system of my all-road. I recently worked on the fuel system and it turned out to be a bit more confusing than I thought it would be. So instead of making you sit through that same learning process if you have one of these cars, I thought I would just explain it to you and therefore get it out of the way. Let's jump over to the other camera and then I can start. So, there are 5 main parts that I want to talk about in this video. 1 is the fuel filler nozzle, 2 is the fuel tank itself, 3 is the pump in the back, 4 is the bucket, what I like to call it, in the back, and 5 is the high pressure pump in the front. And I guess 6 if you want to talk about the fuel filter, which can be confusing, but I can explain that too. So, fuel filler nozzle. What you have to be careful with here is the fact that it has a theft protection, where if you go down it with a nozzle, like a hose, to pump diesel out, if you want to, for example, open the tank, it leads you down the wrong chamber, so you can't suck any diesel out of the fuel tank, and that's just a dead end. That you have to be careful with. Also, it locks when you lock the car, so you obviously can't open it. You would have to break it open. But yes, that is that. There has to be a emergency release in there somewhere. Haven't found it myself yet. Next, let's talk about the fuel tank itself. So since this car is 4-wheel drive, Audi had to move around the drive shaft that goes down the center of it, obviously. So they couldn't place a giant fuel tank in there, which is what they do with front-wheel drive cars. But they couldn't do that with this car, so they had to move around the drive shaft. So, the main tank itself consists of 2 main bladders, what you could call them, on the left and right side of the car. They are connected about like this much at the front. So the top is one giant piece. It is one big tank. It's just, it's kind of shaped like a W at the bottom. So it kind of goes up and then over the drive shaft and then back down on the other side, obviously. But that leaves you with a problem. Since the fuel pump sucks from the right side, yes, it does suck. It doesn't blow it through. It sucks it through from the front. Since the fuel tank or fuel pump at the front sucks it from the right side, that leaves you with the problem that the left side is going to be full and the right side is going to be empty. So, to get around that, they installed a second fuel pump in the back, which is mainly just there to equalize the left and right side of the tank and fill the bucket, what I call it. The bucket is there to equalize all the other, not equalize. The bucket is there to keep the fuel system steady and running well, even if you have low to empty tanks. So what it is, it's like this little container that the back fuel pump fills up this little container to keep it steady and keep it rolling through so it doesn't get any air in the system and break the main pump. So the pump and the bucket are one system or one clot in there that you theoretically are able to just take out of the tank. To get to it, you have to just pull up on the seat. It's not screwed, it's just pinned down, so you can just pull it up and unless you have very break old plastic. For me it worked perfectly, no problem. You just pull up on the thing and then just take the bench out of it. No problem. Then there's this little cover that mainly insulates the outside of the car, since the tank is on the outside, from the inside of the car. Below that, you immediately have the fuel tank itself. So there's this round lid on it. I will mainly, or I'll probably.
Alright, I'm pausing the video again because I didn't explain this well enough in the video, in my opinion. So here we have the fuel tank. It's underneath your car, obviously. This is the front. Down here is the front of the car. Back here is the back of the car, obviously. Drive shaft goes down the middle here. Differential is somewhere here. Your bench, or your rear bench seat, is here. It sits above this part of the fuel tank. This part sits above this part of the fuel tank, behind it in the trunk. This right here is the bucket, as I refer to it, and the pump and the first filler gauge. This over here is the other filler gauge. And as we can see here, there's two main bladders to the fuel tank, and one connecting little itty bit in the middle. So this pump back here only equalizes these two things and fills the bucket. It does not get anything up to the front. Important. If you want to open these two holes right here, this one and this one, first drain your tank to about half or less, because this part up here sits above these two. So if it's more than half full, if you open this, all of this diesel will come rushing your way and flood your entire car and below your car. So bad idea, don't do it. Okay, now that we have that out of the way, to drain the fuel tank, what I did is I disconnected the fuel filter at the front and just sucked it out, since like I already said, the fuel filler has a theft protection system. Let's get back to the video.
But below that, right below the insulator thing cap, is the main fuel tank and a round cap there. Once you take that off, or first you have to take off all the hoses, like the run back and the exit hose. Once you take those off, you can flip that up, and then you can look inside and see the bucket.
Alright, I'm back again to talk to you about the bucket. This, as you can see, is the bucket right here. This is the cap of the fuel tank. This goes on top with that little metal secure ring. This right here is the fuel pump itself, the back one, so that's the one that fills the bucket and equalizes the two halves of the tank. This right here is the bucket itself, and what happens is that this pump either sucks from the bottom of it down here, or from the other side from one of these hoses, and it pumps it into the outside here, into the bucket, and fills this bucket. This line right here, the big one that you can see, that is the one that comes from the front, where the big pump in the front sucks the fuel through. So there's a little mesh down here, and after that mesh, if that's not clogged, it sucks it through, goes to the front, to the filter. This is the pump. So there's one measuring fuel level measuring thingy on this side, and one on the other side. So be careful that you don't bend those, because those could get annoying to replace. So yeah, back to the video.
And the fuel pump. Like I said, that fuel pump is just from equalizing left to right. That has nothing to do with leading it up to the front. That's the other pump. So we're talking about that. There you will have the main assembly of the bucket and the fuel pump. Also, you do have two fuel filler gauges, or two fuel filler levels. One on the right side of the tank, one on the left side of the tank. Be careful that you don't bend those, break those, because that will affect your fuel gauge at the front. So that is that. Just be warned that you can untuckten that the fuel pump from the front, from the fuse box that's in the dashboard on the left side of the driver. You can start it and you can hear it. If you can hear it, it runs. If you can, it will most likely transfer fuel. However, no matter how long you start this fuel pump or run this fuel pump, it will not get fuel up to the front. That's where I had my problem. So, once you have all of this and it's working and it's good, you go up to the front. So this pump and its line runs straight to the back, well, through the fuel filter into the back. So the fuel system here, or the fuel pump here, runs straight from here into the fuel filter into the back. And yes, it does suck it from the back tank. So this runs straight into the bucket at the back and sucks it out of there. So it also still has its little mesh filter. So if you live in an area where there isn't too clean fuel, I live in Germany, so that shouldn't be a problem. But if you live in an area where there isn't too clean fuel, you might, if you have problem with your fuel system, you might want to look at that little mesh filter at the bottom of that bucket. But anyway, it runs straight from the back, sucks it through, and comes in right here. This is your arrival from the back tank. This is also where I had my problem, since when trying to get this off with pliers, I seem to have ripped a little crack into this hose, and therefore it wasn't able to suck any fuel from the back system from the back, so it just sucked the filter dry every time and then stopped running. So this is your fuel tank line that comes from the back. This is your line that goes up to the front. You can follow it here. It is see-through right here. If it's still original in your car, it is see-through, so you can see if there's air bubbles or if there's actual fuel running. And it goes straight into your high pressure pump right here. Now, what you want to be careful of is the fact that you want to have as little air in here as possible, because the diesel does oil or grease the pump up here. So if this runs dry for too long, it starts sending little metal shards everywhere through your fuel system and into all of your injectors. Those get expensive. This gets expensive, so be careful of that. So when you do your fuel filter, when you change that, make sure that you fill this up, the new one, you fill it up all the way until it's at the tippy top, close this, and then you little bit, like half a turn, want to unscrew each of these. Then what you do is you start it, or you try to start it, because it won't start. You try to start it until it runs. That way, there's no air in this line, or in this line, or in this line, or in here. So, that way you make sure that there's no air in here, and it won't cause you any harm later. Once it's running, you turn it off, or you leave it running, whichever you decide to do, and you close these. That way there's no air in it, you're good, you're safe. Then, since there's more than those two lines, obviously, in here, you have your run back. It runs in here, which is either a cooler or...
Alright, this is the last time that I will stop this video, I promise. So, I didn't explain this again in the video, this part right here. And it is, the fuel comes straight from the pump, the unused fuel, and goes in a hose into this area. This is a fuel heater, you can say. I do explain why it heats the fuel. It's so this filter doesn't slush up and freeze in the winter in really cold temperatures. So it heats the fuel. That's what it does. Yeah, let's get back into it.
So, what this is it runs back into here or completely back into the fuel tank. This is a important part as well, right here. It is a little valve that opens up when it gets warm. So what that is for is the fact that when it gets really cold, diesel gets slushy and maybe even ices up. So since this is a very tight and narrow area right here, and it has to squeeze through the filter, and that obviously can't happen if it's ice. So what this does is that it leads back some of the warm and lets some of that warm diesel that just ran through the system but wasn't used back into the fuel filter, therefore warming it up, therefore stopping it from freezing up and clogging the system. This is an important part. Make sure that this is working, because that could break your entire car. That is basically all the important information about the fuel system of this car. If you have any questions, watch the video through again maybe, or if you have any questions, I will be available in the comments. I always read my comments. By the very few comments that I get, I always read them, and I will be able to respond to you within like a day or two maximum. Like that's the latest that it will take me, or the longest that it will take me to respond. Please ask questions. I know a bit about the system now, and I am available if you have any questions or need help diagnosing something. So that is everything important to the fuel system in this car. And make sure, that is my only real big message, make sure that front pump does not run empty, because this will get expensive. And yes, VW and Skoda and stuff like that had the same engine, the 2.5 liter TDI, V6 TDI. However, you have to be very careful, since they also made it in a lower horsepower configuration. And I'm not sure if VW and Skoda parts work on this Audi engine. It might. I am not guaranteeing you anything, but it might. However, those are still very expensive, and you should not let the front dry. So, like I said, if you have any questions, please ask. I am working on a explainer video for the air suspension for this car, since it is a pretty simplistic but can be at times still confusing system. I am working on it. It should be up soon, hopefully. We'll see how far I get, how long it takes me to record stuff. Thank you for watching, and